Airport, where Air Force One is on the ground right now. This afternoon, President Biden is going to speak at the LBJ Presidential Library to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act.
You can see Air Force One. Well, you could there for a second. Air Force One just landing at the Austin airport, so you can expect a ground stop there at the airport this afternoon as the plane taxis through to the caravan of vehicles to take the president to the LBJ Library down by the UT campus. We don't know the exact route. We assume the interstate will be involved there, so you're going to want to avoid that area if at all possible. Of course, at the LBJ Library event today, President Biden is also expected to speak about his proposal for the Supreme Court reform, as well as constitutional amendment that would strip the presidents of immunity from prosecution. Now, we don't know exactly what the route that Motorcade will take from the Austin airport to the LBJ Library today, but as you can imagine, officials warning everyone to expect a bit of extra traffic while the president makes his trip from the airport to the school and from the LBJ Library back to the airport later this afternoon.
That's right. Traffic is going to be extremely busy, and you can expect for TxDOT to start what it's calling rolling closures on major roadways. That is going to include I-35 and Texas 71 during this visit as the president moves from the airport to the LBJ Library and then back to Air Force One. Now, Manor Road and Red River Streets, both very close to the LBJ Library, so those two streets should have at least partial road closures this afternoon. Those should be starting soon since the president and Air Force One now on the ground. And travelers should also anticipate delays at Austin Bergstrom International Airport. Airport officials tell us during the president's arrival and departure, he just arrived, they will put a ground stop in place, and this means planes won't be able to land or take off. And if you are planning to fly today, you can expect delays of about 15 to 30 minutes.
As you can see live on your screen, Air Force One has touched down here in Austin with President Biden aboard. Now, the president's visit actually supposed to happen earlier this month, but it was postponed after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump in Pennsylvania about 3 weeks ago. We know now that the airport and the LBJ Library along the Motorcade route, security will be extra tight today, and as we've talked about already, expect heavy traffic as many roadways, including major thoroughfares like 71 and Interstate 35, will be closed down to allow the president's motorcade to go from the airport to the library and again back to the airport.
That's right, and I don't know if we can take this right now. Let's take a live look inside the LBJ Library. You can see quite a crowd is starting to gather inside there right now. This is where President Biden is going to speak in just a short time. Now, this event is set to start around 3. Of course, things running a little bit late this afternoon, so it might be around 3:30 when the president actually arrives. The president is expected to start speaking as soon as possible once he gets there. They're saying between about 3:30 and maybe 4. Now, this event is not open to the public, but KVUE will be streaming President Biden's remarks live on KVUE Plus. That's available on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. You can also hear and see the president speaking at the LBJ Library this afternoon on our website, KVUE.com.
It will be a busy day here in the Lone Star State for the president. As we mentioned, he will speak at the LBJ Library today to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act that was signed, of course, back then by President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Once President Biden leaves Austin late this evening, he's headed to Houston. Tonight, he will pay his respects to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, the Congresswoman lying in state at Houston City Hall today. She died earlier this month after battling pancreatic cancer.
She had served in Congress since 1994, and before that, she was a Houston City Council member. All day, so many Houstonians have been visiting City Hall to come in, see her, and honor Jackson Lee's memory. And the president is set to pay his respects at around 7:30 tonight before heading back to the White House this evening.
Let's keep watching as Air Force One taxis there at Austin's airport today. The president will then exit the plane and immediately enter the motorcade. That motorcade, of course, will take him to the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library on the University of Texas campus, where again he will speak They told us about 3:30. If he gets to the from the airport to the school, the schedule depends on the traffic, I guess, for him to get there and get situated for that. This is a little behind schedule. We were expecting the plane to land about 30 minutes ago. But as things happen sometimes, the delays took place today. The president touched down about 5 minutes ago and is now taxiing to that motorcade there at Austin's airport. Again, a ground stop is in effect, so no planes taking off or landing at this current time, as this plane has stopped all traffic at the airport for now. They will then resume flight. So if you have a flight this afternoon out of the airport, if you're driving to the airport, keep that in mind. Traffic will be heavy, and some of those flights may be delayed by 15 to 20 minutes later this afternoon.
That's right. Austin Bergstrom International Airport wanted to make sure people understood that this is why the ground stop is happening. There has not been an emergency. It is just Air Force One and President Biden landing today, landing right now, as you can see. And when they take off a little later on this evening, there's going to be another ground stop as well. Now, this isn't the first time that President Biden has been to Austin. I believe the last time he was actually here was when he was vice president, and this was years ago, back in 2013. But of course, we've seen other presidents stop by here within those few years as well. President Obama, President Trump, former presidents, Trump and Obama, both came to Austin, and basically, it seems as though President Biden will be taking the same route from the airport to the LBJ library, usually the fastest travel route. And that should be I-35, down I-35, and probably Dean Keaton. He could take Manor Road, but either way, those roads will have full stops in place. Traffic will not be able to get through those particular areas.
Again, this visit was supposed to take place back on July 15th. Of course, the president at the time was battling COVID-19. He had to take a few days of rest and recovery, so they rescheduled this visit to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act to this week. And today, the president is in Austin to do just that, to commemorate that anniversary, of course, at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Library on the University of Texas at Austin campus. As you can see on your screen, live pictures from Austin's airport. Air Force One has touched down and now come to a stop. The president will exit the plane again and join the motorcade to head north to the UT Austin campus. We again expect that to be Highway 71 to Interstate 35, there to at least Dean Keaton, maybe a little further, to loop around for the president to speak there at the library later this afternoon. He'll then leave Austin, headed to Houston to pay his respects to late Congressman Sheila Jackson Lee, who was lying in state in Houston today. So the president, as you take a live look, this is 71.
No
headed out.
Traffic as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, well, at least on that side.
Yeah.
There's plenty of traffic on the other side, but as you can tell, the traffic headed into town has been completely shut off. The feeder road is the way to go, and that's definitely packed. On the eastbound side of the highway there, you can see a lot of traffic there backed up as well. So this is going to be the case for the next, I would say, 30 minutes to 45 minutes for traffic to be diverted and slowed and stopped in some occasion for the president's motorcade to make it safely and swiftly to the LBJ library. Again, 71 to 35 is what we're expecting. So that will be the scene on Interstate 35 as well, headed northbound from the airport to the LBJ library. Secret Service, of course, a big part of the entourage for the president. You can see them in the foreground and alongside the plane as they exit the plane to make their checks upon landing. This is standard protocol for any time the president travels on Air Force One. This scene you're seeing now play out on the screen is a standard procedure for the president and his entourage. The president will exit from the back of the plane.
And we don't know who he traveled with, actually, or who is going to be greeting him at the airport, if anyone. Usually when a president does land, there is quite a number of people that are out there at the airport to greet him, the mayor, other Congress people. But I'm not sure who that is going to be in particular today.
Looked like the press corps actually was exiting from the back. I guess the president there will exit. You can see the motorcade now with the president's limousine take its position there with the press corps, photographers and reporters there to document the president's visit here to Austin. As you can imagine, this is a big trip for the president as he made the announcement last week about not continuing his candidacy for president. So his trip to Austin here, really his first major trip outside of his normal visits to Delaware and in Washington, D.C. Since he made that announcement. So you can tell the interest level for the press and all those that accompany the president along these trips is definitely at a high level here in Austin this afternoon. That's
right. I know he's probably going to have some remarks to say about that, since that has definitely been a topic of conversation for a long time now. And also at the LBJ Library today, he's also expected to speak about his proposal for Supreme Court reforms. That's definitely something he's been wanting to talk about, as well as a constitutional amendment that would strip presidents of immunity from prosecution. And as we can see, Mayor Watson is just out there now. Just walking along. It looked like and I believe Lloyd Doggett was out there as well. And I think that's Congressman Doggett. You can see the line. There's Mayor Watson. They're getting ready to say hello to the president, welcome him to Austin. You can see the line of people there to welcome the president here to town, includes the mayor of Austin. I think Congressman Kassar was there. I thought I saw him as well. Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who was the first U.S. Congress member to call for President Biden to drop out of the race earlier this month. Of course, then many other voices from the Democratic Party followed suit, which ultimately led to the decision that was made last week. As we're zooming in now on the door, this is the door President Biden will exit off of Air Force One. Again, you're looking live at Austin's airport. Air Force One has landed about 10 minutes ago. The president about to exit the plane to greet those dignitaries, or I guess they are going to greet him and welcome him to Austin. He'll then enter the motorcade and head to the LBJ Library, where he will speak on the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act being signed by then President Lyndon Baines Johnson back in 1964. The line of dignitaries. There's some House Democrats out there as well, and Judge Andy Brown. They are in position to greet the president as he comes off of Air Force One this afternoon. Cheryl Cole, I saw her out there. And like you said, we have Mayor Kirk Watson, Congressman Lloyd Doggett. Greg Kassar is out there as well, I believe. We can see the top of Congressman Kassar's head there, just over the limousine. Again, so Secret Service providing that service and security detail for the entire area around Air Force One, and will be with the president, of course, all day today. And then the dignitaries you see there before you, I would assume will make their way as well to the LBJ Library to listen to the president speak this afternoon. Again, that's supposed to happen about 3:30. Normally that would be about, I guess, about a 25 to 30-minute trip from the airport to the LBJ Library. Today it will not take that long, as we saw just moments ago. 71 completely shut down, headed into town. And then I-35, we assume, will be the route from 71 to take him north to the UT Austin campus. So there's going to be quite a traffic backup, as you can imagine, but TxDOT says these are rolling stops. So once the president gets through one particular section, they'll be able to reopen the highway. So, but of course, right now, 71 totally shut down, no traffic whatsoever, so the president's motorcade can move quickly from Austin Bergstrom International Airport to the LBJ Library. You do see Mayor Kirk Watson there. We've mentioned he's there, along with several members of Congress, in addition to the press corps that follows the president wherever he travels. This group, you can see reporters and photographers, along with other dignitaries on Air Force One, for this really historic trip to commemorate the anniversary of the Civil Rights Act that was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson back in 1964. Huge part of the legislation and accomplishment for LBJ when he was the president. Of course, his library on the University of Texas at Austin campus, a wonderful place, a beautiful museum, and that is where this speech will take place today to commemorate the anniversary of the very important legislation that was signed by LBJ 60 years ago this year. And it's such an important piece of legislation, one of the building blocks of America. I truly believe it is. And just the LBJ Library itself, so full of so many historic items and so much history that was made for this country. And for President Biden to be there to commemorate the 60th anniversary, it's a huge deal. for him to be here.
Really is. It's an important day for the president. Of course, a historic week he just completed, announcing that he will not run for re-election, giving way to his vice president, Kamala Harris, who will now presumably be the Democratic nominee. The president, as you can see live on your screen, has landed. This is Air Force One at the Austin airport, something we haven't seen in a while. Air Force One and a sitting United States president visiting our city, and the day will be fast. He won't be here long as he heads to Houston later this evening, but the president here for a very important event. We haven't seen him deplane yet. We expect him to exit that door. At least that's all indications are. That's the way he's going to come, as the dignitaries and the press are all lined there by the presidential limousine and motorcade, as they will then head 71 to 35, we assume, down to the up to the LBJ library right at 26th Street there, Dean Keaton, as the president will deliver those remarks. Here comes the president now, President Joe Biden.
Walking out of Air Force One.
The 46th president of the United States, entering his final few months as the president of the United States. He will be that until January 20th of next year, when a new president will take the oath of office. The president being greeted by several dignitaries, including Congressman Lloyd Doggett, Congressman Greg Casar. Austin Mayor Kirk Watson is also there. I guess that's Greg Casar he went to right as he deplaned. There's Congressman Casar. Lloyd Doggett is next with the blue jacket there, the gray hair. That's Congressman Lloyd Doggett, the first Democratic congressman to call for the president to exit the race for president. So I'm curious to see the interaction here between those two. I'm sure they've spoken since, but the president there greeting some other Congress members, as
taking some selfies
as they are apt to do these days. Take a few selfies with the Congress members and the city officials here from Austin. I know they're excited to have the president in town again. I can't recall him being here as president. I think this is his first trip.
The last time he was here, he was vice president, and that was back in 2013, I believe. So for him to make this one of his last trips as president of the United States, coming to Austin is a pretty big deal, as you can see from the number of dignitaries that are out there to greet him and welcome him to our city.
There's Mayor Kirk Watson, just shook his hand there. I know Andy Brown is there as well.
Cheryl Cole is out there as well.
So no doubt they're all excited to have the president in town today, even though for just a short period of time. It's always great for the city officials to welcome the sitting United States president to our city, the great city of Austin. There's Andy Brown. Yes, he's the tall guy. He's a lot taller than some of the other dignitaries, but it's nice to see them all there to greet President Joe Biden, the 46th president of the United States, as he arrives in Austin on Air Force One for a very special day today at the LBJ library.
And like you said, it is going to be a very short visit, because what's going to happen is he's going to hop in the motorcade, go to the LBJ library, give his speech, commemorate the 60th anniversary, and then they will be heading back to Austin Bergstrom International Airport. There will be another rolling traffic stop, another ground stop as he gets back onto Air Force One. And then he won't be going right back to Washington, D.C. He's going to stop in Houston, and that's where he's going to pay his respects to the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She is lying in state at Houston City Hall today, and she died earlier this month after a battle with cancer. She'd served in Congress since 1994. Before that, she was a Houston City Council member and a diehard Democrat. So she was very well connected to the president, and he is going there to say his final goodbyes and to honor her memory. And after that is over, he will get back on to Air Force One later this evening and go back to Washington, D.C.
Again, you're watching President Joe Biden's arrival at the Austin airport, greeted by dignitaries both statewide and here in Austin, with Austin's Mayor Kirk Watson leading the delegation. He's shaking a few hands. And I've heard this about President Biden. I haven't witnessed this specific event very often, but I've heard that he's very, very interested in speaking with everyone. And I think that's evidenced by what we've seen over the last 10 minutes. He's gone down the line, shaking every hand, taking every selfie. And of course, these people, no doubt, most of them at least, don't get this opportunity very often, especially the Austin city leaders, to speak with a sitting United States president. They're taking and making the most of this opportunity as President Joe Biden is in Austin for a few hours today to speak at the LBJ Presidential Library. Again, the point of this was supposed to happen about 2 weeks ago. The president got sick and had to reschedule, so they moved it to today, and now they are here in Austin to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act being signed in 1964 by then President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Of course, his presidential library is where the president will speak in we thought about 30 minutes. We don't know.
Yeah, that's not going to happen in about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
He's still out there saying hello, visiting with people, some who are old friends like Congressman Lloyd Doggett, some who are newer, Greg Kazar, Cheryl Cole, Mayor Kirk Watson, another old friend. But yeah, he's out there. He's just making sure everyone is spoken to, and that looks like it's going to take a little while.
He's making his way down the line to speak with everyone. I think that's Congressman Coons there. I can't tell.
I can't tell.
He's right behind someone. I think that's, and I know there are some Houston Congress members there as well. I think I saw Al Green. Al Green was there.
And I'm not sure if Royce West was there as well.
A lot of dignitaries, no doubt, in town. I think that's Al Sharpton. Is it not? Maybe not. He's headed for the car now, so we're going to wrap up here. We just wanted to bring that to you live, a historic moment here in Austin. As President Joe Biden is in town, he's going to make his way now from the airport to the LBJ Library. So keep that in mind. If you got a flight this afternoon, expect about a 15, maybe 20-minute delay for the next hour or so. Traffic on 71 already shut down heading into town. Avoid that if you can. And I-35 headed northbound. Expect that to be rolling stoppages as you head towards the LBJ Library this afternoon.
That's right. That could affect Dean Keaton, Manor Road, and Red River Street, since they are in the vicinity and very, very close to the LBJ Library, where the president is about to head right now.
Of course, we'll have live coverage of this coming up on KVUE News at 5. We'll bring you everything we have, in-depth coverage of the president's visit coming up tonight on KVUE News at 5 and 6.
And now we will return to your regularly scheduled programming that's already in progress.
I don't want this symposium to come here and spend 2 days talking about what we have done. The progress has been much too small. We haven't done nearly enough. I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I had 6 years and couldn't do more than I did. And until we overcome unequal history, we cannot overcome unequal opportunity. That is not, nor will it ever be, a very easy goal for us to achieve. But that is just the point, now and always. There is no surrender, there is no loss involved. No advantage is safe, and no gain is secure in this society unless those advantages and those gains are opened up to all alike.
I remember one time I drove up in front of the only service station in Plains, and they refused to put gasoline in my car because they considered us to be, I won't use the word, lovers of black people. And so we struggled through that. 2 years later, when I was finishing up my first year in the Senate, Lyndon Johnson came along with his great insight and political courage, and literally changed my personal life and the life of everyone that lived in America.
There are no final victories in politics. We were given a mission that will never be completed, to move toward a more perfect union. And we always know that around every turn in the road, the forces who want to turn back the clock or divide those who would make a common future are ready.
I've got great respect for the way President Johnson used the presidency to achieve big goals. He understood the risk for his party and his risk to his coalition in pushing civil rights. No one knew politics better than LBJ. Yet when challenged, he responded, "Well, what the hell's the presidency for?" Every generation of Americans will look back at the Civil Rights Act and say, this is what the presidency is for.
Perhaps easy to conclude that there are limits to change, that we are trapped by our own history, and politics is a fool's errand. And we'd be better off if we roll back big chunks of LBJ's legacy, or at least if we don't invest too much of our hope in our government. I reject such cynicism because I have lived out the promise of LBJ's efforts, because Michelle has lived out the legacy of those efforts, because my daughters have lived out the legacy of those efforts, because I and millions of my generation were in a position to take the baton that he handed to us. Our rights, our freedoms, they are not given. They must be won. They must be nurtured through struggle and discipline and persistence and faith.
Storm clouds are breaking, and my worries, they are fading. And oh yeah, it feels like freedom. And my sisters and my brothers, I see them coming together. And oh yeah, well it feels like freedom. Are you ready now? 'Cause I'm ready now for a change to come. Feet don't fail me now, 'cause I'm ready now to move on. Are you ready now? 'Cause I'm ready now for a change to come. Feet don't fail me now, 'cause I'm ready now to move on. Freedom.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I want to take this occasion to talk to you about what that law means to every American.
188 years ago this week, a small band of valiant men began a long struggle for freedom. They pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, not only to found a nation, but to forge an ideal of freedom, not only for political independence, but for personal liberty, not only to eliminate foreign rule, but to establish a rule of justice in the affairs of men. That struggle was a turning point in our history. Today, in far corners of distant continents, the ideals of those American patriots still shape the struggles of men who hunger for freedom. This is a proud triumph. Yet those who founded our country knew that freedom would be secure only if each generation fought to renew and enlarge its meaning. From the Minutemen in Concord to the soldiers in Vietnam, each generation has been equal to that trust. Americans of every race and color have died in battle to protect our freedom. Americans of every race and color have worked to build a nation of widening opportunities. Now, our generation of Americans has been called on to continue the unending search for justice within our borders. We believe that all men are created equal, yet many are denied equal treatment. We believe that all men have certain unalienable rights, Yet many Americans do not enjoy those rights. We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty, yet millions are being deprived of those blessings, not because of their own failures, but because of the color of their skin. The reasons are deeply embedded in history and tradition and the nature of man. We can understand without rancor or hatred how this all happened, but it cannot continue. Our Constitution, the foundation of our republic, forbids it. The principles of our freedom forbid it. Morality forbids it. And the law I will sign tonight forbids it. Its purpose is to promote a more abiding commitment to freedom, a more constant pursuit of justice, and a deeper respect for human dignity. We will achieve these goals because most Americans are law-abiding citizens and want to do the right thing. This is why the Civil Rights Act relies first on voluntary compliance, then on the efforts of local communities and states to secure the rights of citizens. It provides for the national authority to step in only when others cannot or will not do their job. This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country. My fellow citizens, we have come now to a time of testing. We must not fail. Let us close the springs of racial poison. Let us pray for wise and understanding hearts. Let us lay aside irrelevant differences and make our nation whole.
And my sisters all over this land. If I had a bell, I'd ring it in the morning, I'd ring it in the evening, all over this land. I'd ring ring I've got a bell, and I've got a song to sing all over this land. It's the hammer of justice. Oh, it's the bell of freedom. It's a song about a love between my brothers and my sisters. Oh
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Updegrove, the President and CEO of the LBJ Foundation. Welcome to our commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And thank you, a huge thank you to the Houston Tillotson Choir, to Ruthie Foster, and to Brian Cranston for introducing this in such a grand manner. The walls of the LBJ Auditorium once again echo with history and voices from the past. 8 years after speaking to Americans in advance of signing the Civil Rights Act, which made real our nation's most sacred promise of all men are created equal, Lyndon Johnson stood on this stage as a former president and delivered his last public remarks. Battling a weak heart, President Johnson defied doctors' orders to give a keynote address at a civil rights symposium he had convened to talk about the state of race in America. He had something to say, and he was determined to say it. Until we overcome unequal history, he declared, we can't overcome unequal opportunity. There is work still to be done, so let's be on with it. The work would fall to others. The following month, our 36th president died of a heart attack at his beloved LBJ ranch. But even now, half a century later, we hear his call. Since then, 4 other presidents, including the first African-American president, have graced this stage to recognize the advancement of civil rights and to talk about the work still to be done. Today, we are deeply honored to welcome the 46th president, Joe Biden, who has made the central cause of his presidency the preservation and strengthening of democracy and has pursued a policy of equity for all, including people of color and others who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality. Among the many things he has done is to appoint the first black woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, to the U.S. Supreme Court, and to choose as his running mate Kamala Harris, the first black woman, South Asian American to hold the vice president, but you already knew that. We are grateful to President Biden for his policy to bolster voting rights, which have been severely weakened since Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, and for all of his efforts to return our nation to the democratic norms and values that provide ballast to our great republic. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." America is at its strongest when justice prevails, and when the winds of change make our country more united, more inclusive, more righteous. The Civil Rights Act we commemorate today, as well as the Voting Rights Act and Fair Housing Act, all championed and signed by Lyndon Johnson, are on exhibition in the LBJ Library's Great Hall just above us. Those transformative laws are surrounded by iconic photographs of the activists who held the front lines of the civil rights movement, and whose unyielding fearlessness in the face of racial tyranny helped bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice and a more perfect union. Among them is Andrew Young, who stood by the side of Martin Luther King Jr. as a lieutenant in the movement they forged as much as any. Upon awarding Ambassador Young the Medal of Freedom, President Jimmy Carter said, "Andy Young is the brightest star in the American firmament. He's a man who represents integrity and understanding, humility and purpose. He has carried on well the heritage of Martin Luther King." To introduce the President of the United States, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Andrew Young.
that I was lined up waiting to be sworn in for Congress. And there was another little fella in the Senate who was too young to get in. They had to wait 3 or 4 days till he turned 30 to swear him in as a United States Senator. For the last 50 years, he has devoted himself to fulfilling the dreams of the American people, all of them, rich, poor, black, white, red, green, gay, straight, whatever we are. And I'm here reminding you that if you live long enough, all of us are going to be handicapped one day. But few people have been able to thrive and succeed in the midst of so much pressure and tension and responsibility as Joe Biden. And I was thinking what I should say, and I said that maybe Ray Charles said it best when he started his recording of America the Beautiful with the third verse of that song. And it said, "Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine." I think that is a promise fulfilled in the life of the 46th President of the United States, Joseph Biden. Mr. President.
Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, really. Thank you. Please. Please. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for that introduction, and above all, for your friendship over the years. There's literally one word that comes to mind every time I think of Andy Young. The word's integrity, absolute integrity. And thank you to the Johnson family for carrying forward the legacy of a truly great president and first lady. Your mom was incredible as well. The same goes to Mark Upgrove, president of the LBJ Foundation. It's great to be back here. I thank you all and distinguished guests gathered here today. Look, I was in college at the University of Delaware in our early beginning years when I heard the news of that President Kennedy had been assassinated. I remember exactly like anybody in my generation remembers exactly where they were sitting, standing, or walking. I was on the steps of one of the university halls called Hullion Hall at the university, listening on a transistor radio with 3 other people. Seemed unbelievable. And then, later watching President Johnson help the nation find a way forward. In his first address after the tragedy, President Johnson said, and I quote, "Nothing could more eloquently honor President Kennedy's memory than the earliest passage of the Civil Rights Bill." That's what he said. As a kid coming up, I always admired President Johnson for his public service, whether it was a school teacher in South Texas,
Master of the United States Senate, historic Vice President and President, his philosophy was simple. In a great society, no one should be left behind. He'd say, it's time for us to come to see that every American gets a decent break and a fair chance to make good. And as Andy Young said, President Johnson met repeatedly with the civil rights leaders and built a coalition to bring that vision to life. And he did. He brought it to life. Over 50 years, the LBJ Foundation has convened this symposium to reflect one of the crowning achievements, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, a defining moment that has since opened doors of opportunities for all Americans, regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, national origin. Together with the Voting Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act, these three landmark laws he signed are remarkable in their scale and their scope. Taken together, these three acts have made this nation fundamentally more fair, fundamentally more just, and most importantly, fundamentally more consistent with our founding principles. For real. And we're a better nation because of them. We must be clear. Their work, our work, is not done. It's not done. We do not celebrate these laws as part of our past, but as critical components of our future. President Johnson understood what President Lincoln understood in his own time, that the courts would determine the scale and scope of our laws. Over 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, President Johnson vowed, in his words, to do this job that Lincoln started, by challenging the court to live up to its constitutional responsibility. He did that by nominating Thurgood Marshall as the first black justice of the Supreme Court. And by aggressively defending civil rights throughout the courts. But now, we live in a different era. In recent years, extreme opinions that the Supreme Court has handed down have undermined long-established civil rights principles and protections. In 2013, the Supreme Court in Shelby County case gutted the Voting Rights Act, opening the floodgates to a wave of restrictive voting laws that have seen states across the country pass. In 2022, the court overruled Roe v. Wade and the right to choose that had been the law of the land for 50 years. 50 years. The following year, the same court eviscerated affirmative action, which had been upheld and reaffirmed for nearly 50 years as well. And now, there's an extreme movement and agenda called Project 2025. Well, by the way, they're serious, man. They're planning another onslaught attacking civil rights in America. For example, Project 2025 calls aggressively attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion all across all aspects of American life. This extreme MAGA movement even proposes to end birthright citizenship. That's how far they've come. End birthright citizenship, which if you're born in America, you're an American citizen. That's how extreme these guys are. This issue and so many other civil rights that Americans take for granted are likely to come before the court in the years to come. And most recently and most shockingly, the Supreme Court established in Trump versus the United States a dangerous precedent. They ruled, as you know, that the President of the United States has immunity for potential crimes he may have committed while in office. Immunity. This nation was founded on the principle there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law. And for all practical purposes, the court's decision almost certainly means that a president can violate their oath, flout our laws, and face no consequences. Here's what Justice Sotomayor, Supreme Court Justice, wrote in her dissent, and I quote, "Under the majority's reasoning, the President now will be insulated from criminal prosecution, orders a Navy SEAL team seeks to assassinate a political rival, immune, organizes a military coup to hold on to power, immune, takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon, immune. In every use of official power, the President is now a king above the law." Just what Justice Sotomayor wrote in her dissent. Folks, just imagine what a president could do in trampling civil rights and liberties given such immunity. The court's being used to weaponize an extreme and unchecked agenda. This decision is a total affront to the basic expectations we have for those who wield the power in this nation, that they are expected to be wholly accountable under the law. The President is no longer constrained by the law, and only limits on abuse of power will be self-imposed by the President alone. That's a fundamentally flawed view and a fundamentally flawed principle, a dangerous principle. On top of its extreme decisions, the court is mired in a crisis of ethics. These scandals involving the justices have caused public opinion to question the court's fairness and independence that are essential to faithfully carrying out its mission of equal justice under the law. For example, there are documented reports of a decades-long effort to reshape the judiciary, including the Supreme Court backed by shadow special interests that also support Project 2025. Undisclosed gift to justice is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars from wealthy benefactors who have interest before the very court they're contributing to. Conflicts of interest from those connected to January 6th insurrectionists. And a blatant attack on nominating and confirming justices of the court itself. Do you all remember when Justice Scalia died in February of 2016? And the Republicans blocked the President's nomination, President Obama's nomination, to fill that vacancy for nearly a year by making up an entirely new standard that there be no confirmations of the court during an election year. But then, when Justice Ginsburg died in 2020, Republicans rushed through the President Trump's nominee at the very same time votes are being cast in an election that Trump would lose. It's outrageous. I know I don't look it, but I served in the Senate for 36 years, including as chairman and ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. I've been told that I've overseen more Supreme Court nominations as senator, vice president, and president than anyone in history, anyone alive today, I should say. I have great respect for our institutions and the separation of powers laid out in our Constitution. But what's happening now is not consistent with that doctrine of separation of powers. Extremism is undermining the public confidence in the court's decisions. As soon as I came to office, I convened a bipartisan presidential commission on the Supreme Court of the United States, comprised of leading constitutional scholars, both liberal and conservative, to provide recommendations on potential reforms to the court. I've been careful in these deliberations because these are serious, serious decisions. In the face of increasing threats to American democratic institutions, I use the Commission's analysis, and today I'm calling for 3 bold reforms to restore trust and accountability to the court and our democracy. As the press shouted to me as I got off Air Force One, the Republican Speaker of the House said, whatever he proposes is dead on arrival. Well, I think his thinking is dead on arrival. First, I'm calling for a constitutional amendment called No One is Above the Law Amendment. It holds, and I mean this sincerely, it holds that there's no immunity for crimes former president committed while in office. I share Our founders' belief that the president must answer to the law. The president is accountable in the exercise of the great power of the presidency. We're a nation of laws, not kings and dictators. The decision can be boiled down to the title of one case, Trump versus the United States. The court asserted it was making a ruling for the ages. That isn't true. The court made a ruling for one, a former president. No other president in our history has asked for this kind of immunity for criminal actions. And no president, no former president, not me, not one, has and should have been given any exception to this with such immunity. The second thing I'm asking for, we've had term limits for presidents of the United States for nearly 75 years after the Truman administration. And I believe we should have term limits for Supreme Court justices of the United States as well. In fact, the United States is the only major constitutional democracy that gives lifetime seats in their high court. Term limits would help ensure that the court membership changes with some regularity. That would make timing for the court's nomination more predictable and less arbitrary. Reduce the chance that any single presidency imposes undue influence in generations to come. The bipartisan commission I convened analyzed various term limit structures. Based on their report, I believe the best structure is the 18-year term limit. That would help ensure the country would not have what it has now, an extreme court that's the product of an attack on the confirmation process that's been weaponized by those seeking to carry out an extreme agenda for decades to come. By the way, these guys mean it. These guys mean it. Project 2025 is real. They mean it. Third, I'm calling for a binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. Supreme Court's current ethics code is weak and even more frightening, voluntary. Any code of Congress must be enforceable. Under the reform I propose, justice would be required to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, recuse themselves in cases in which they or their spouses have a financial or other conflict of interest. Most people don't realize that Congress passed a law decades ago that says all federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, have to recuse themselves in such cases. But the current justices insist on enforcing that requirement themselves without any public oversight or compulsion. See, that's their decision. They don't have to tell us how they made it. That might work if the court was actually enforcing those requirements, but they are not. The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now. My fellow Americans, based on all my experience, I'm certain we need these reforms. We need these reforms to restore trust in the courts, preserve the system of checks and balances that are vital to our democracy. There are also common sense reforms that a vast majority of the American people support, as well as leading constitutional law scholars, progressives, and conservatives. I look forward to working with the Congress to implement these necessary reforms. A number of members of Congress are here today. Let me close with this. President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 just 2 days before the 4th of July. He said in that bill signing, and I quote, "This is a proud triumph, yet those who founded our country knew the freedom would be secure only if each generation fought to renew in largest meaning, end of quote. That's what I've tried to do throughout my career, inspired by the cause of civil rights. That's what got me involved initially. My state was a state that was segregated by law. We were one who, only reason we didn't fight in the side of the South, we couldn't get there. I'm serious. What motivated me to be a public defender, a county councilman, I'll never forget, I had a good job with a big trial firm. And in Delaware, you have to study for the bar for 6 months before you're allowed to take it. And in the meantime, while I was studying for the bar, that's when Dr. King was assassinated. We're the only state in the nation, city in the nation, that had the military stationed on every corner with drawn bayonets for 10 months, insisting, because we had a very conservative Democratic governor. In those days, when the Democrats won, they could choose to be part of the Southern Governors or Northeast Governors Conference. They choose the Southern Governors Conference lots of times. But guess what? It got me engaged. I love how reading these biographies of me now that I knew I was going to run for president. I remember walking in to the public defender's office, which was part-time at the time, and asking for an application because I wanted to join the public defender's office. And he looked at me, his name is Franny Kearns, he said, "Don't you work for Pickett, Warburton, Sanders?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Why the hell would you want to do this?" Not a joke. But I said, "Let me do it." I became a public defender. Folks, here's the deal. Because I got engaged like a lot of you do, whether you run for office or not. You get engaged and you want to change things. So I kept trying to change the Democratic Party in my state, which is very conservative. And then a group of people came to me, as my senator knows, Chris Coons, came to me and said, "Look, we want you to run for state senate." I said, I can't go to Dover all the time. I'm just starting a law firm. I'm a part-time public defender. And then they came back to me and said, "Why don't you run for the county council?" I said, "I can't." And they said, "You stupid SOB, it's right across the street there." I'm serious. Meets only twice a week. So my sister, my best friend, managed my campaign, and we picked a district that we couldn't possibly win. No Democrat had ever won. But my problem was I had my sister doing my campaign. And we won. Next thing I know, I was part of a group assigned as young senators, young elected officials, to try to bring the party around to get someone to run for the United States Senate. And I was put on a commission. When you're the young lawyer, you get to turn the lights on and off after every meeting. And so I remember going down to the Democratic convention off year in Dover, Delaware. And after the afternoon session, went back and I was in my room. Just a nice motel you just drive up to, get out and walk in your door there. And you know, an 8x10 bathroom, a shower, and a stall. And I had my towel around me and the shaving cream on my face, and they were bam, bam, bam at my door. And I thought it was the guys that came down with. The guy was had a talk show named Bob Cunningham, was a big civil rights guy, and two others. So I thought it was them. I walked to open the door. There was a former governor, former Supreme Court justice, swear to God, the state chairman, and the former congressman. And they said, "We just had dinner." I said, "I'm sorry, gentlemen." And I walked in, I ran to the bathroom, shake the shave grip, thinking I could put something on. There wasn't anything here. I walked back out with a towel. I'm standing against a nail, a desk nail to the wall, and they're on the beds that are nailed to the headboards are nailed to the wall. Four of them sitting across. I said, "Joe, we were thinking you should run for the United States Senate." I said, gentlemen, you serious? And they went on and made their case. I hope all of you had a professor as enlightened as mine. I had one professor named Dr. Ingersoll, my political philosophy professor, at the University of Delaware, which is between Dover and where I was going home. So I called him, I could stop by and see him. And I said, what do you think I should do? He said, Joe, remember what Plato said. I'm thinking, what the hell did Plato say? Seriously. So Plato said, the penalty good people pay for not being involved in politics is being governed by people worse than themselves. I went home and spoke to my deceased wife. She says, look, Joe, you're working 40 hours a week trying to set up a law firm, and you're working 40 hours a week as a public defender. Get in or get out. Next thing you know, I was running. Nixon won my state by 60% of the vote. We won by a staggering 3,800 votes. My point is, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But look, and I went on to be able to be, I had to wait a little bit to be sworn in. You got to be 30 to be sworn in. And then I was the vice president, the first African-American president in American history. Now I'm president to our first woman vice president. I've made clear how I feel about Kamala, and she's been an incredible partner to me, a champion of civil rights throughout her career. And she'll continue to be an inspiring leader and project this very idea of America. The very idea that we're all created equal and deserve to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that, but we've never walked away from it. We've never walked away because leaders like Lyndon Baines Johnson, my fellow Americans, in 2 years we'll commemorate the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. That July 4th of 2026 will be a moment not only about our past, but about our future. Imagine that moment and ask yourself, what do we want to be? We can and must be protected and expand our civil rights in America. We can and must prevent the abuse of presidential power and restore faith in the Supreme Court. We can and must strengthen the guardrails of democracy. We must have to remind ourselves who we are. We're the United States of America, and there is nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing when we do it together. So let's stay together, and God bless you all. Lyndon Johnson, Lady Bird Johnson, and may God bless the whole family. Ladies and gentlemen, may God protect our troops. Thank you for listening.
Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh. We'll cry glory, oh glory, oh. Selma is now for every man, woman, and child.